Hey everyone, Josh here, bona fide RK Motors content guru, dapper hair enthusiast, and fan of everything old-timey. This week's trivia question: what power plant originally powered Ford's Model B? This week's spotlight is this exquisite 1934 Ford Victoria. So this is a Ford Model B, more commonly known, I guess, for 1933 and 34 as a Ford Model 46, to denote the very important thing that made the Model B so successful, which is Ford's Flathead V8. This was the first mass market or affordable car to offer V8 power in America. The Flathead was exclusive to Lincoln until 1932, when Lincoln went in the way of V12s, which of course gave rise to some of the most iconic hot rods ever created, in my opinion. So the Flathead V8 was a $10 option, which meant that pretty much everybody who bought one of these cars optioned for the V8. It was just more car for the money. Despite producing these at 32 different facilities around America, Ford had a hard time keeping up with demand. So what they would do is they would produce the car as a knockdown kit at River Rouge, which still turns out F-150s to this day, and they would ship them by rail to various facilities in America where the cars were assembled and sold. One of those facilities was located right here in Charlotte. It's currently called Camp North End, and it's a cool place to Google if you're interested. It was designed by legendary Detroit and industrial architect Albert Kahn, as were many of Ford's buildings, and that'll be important later in this video. So the Ford Model B was available in 14 different body styles, one of which included a woody wagon that was built from actual Ford-owned timber. This is what's referred to as a Victoria body style. 1934 was actually the final year of the Victoria body style, and it was the only year to feature the slant back with a nice little fold-out cargo area that comes with a cover. This was Edsel Ford styling. Anybody who knows 20s and 30s Fords knows how important Edsel Ford was to that process. This is a very nice ground-up restoration in Coach Maroon. It's a pretty common color for these cars. And it has a lot of deluxe trim items. So, if you're dealing with, I guess, 20s through 40s Fords, you have either standard trim or deluxe trim. So deluxe trim would give you things such as painted fenders, body match fenders instead of black, all the pinstriping, the red pinstriping, chrome trimmed horns, and of course something that doesn't seem like a luxury these days, dual tail lamps. In addition to the deluxe trim, there are a lot of factory options on this car. First and foremost is, of course, the awesome Greyhound radiator topper. Mirrors were a factory option, and cowl lamps were a factory option. One interesting note about this restoration is it does make do with the standard black wire wheels instead of body-colored wheels, which most deluxe cars came with. Let's take a look at that legendary Ford V8. Okay, so this is a correct 221 cubic inch Ford Flathead. It's probably pushing about 75, 85 horsepower. That doesn't sound like a lot now, but back in the day, these are relatively light cars, and that was quite a lot of power. 1934 was the first year of the downdraft carburetor. Of course, you had the aluminum heads. And it's a 6-volt electrical system, which is correct to this era. A lot of these cars, when they get restored, they get converted to 12 volt just because it's easier, easier to jump them off, easier to charge them. This is a very correct car, correct restoration. So the Ford Flathead was produced in various versions for roughly 41 years. It was succeeded at Ford by the Y block. It was a darling of hot rodders, one, because it was the first affordable American V8, but really because it was very durable as long as you were able to keep the engine cool. It was easy to rebuild, and they were really easy to find. It's kind of like the antique version of today's LS motor. So this engine was the first monoblock design, meaning the crankcase and all the cylinders were cast as one unit. It also featured a high-pressure oil system, which made it very good for speed runs or motorsports. That might be one reason Bonnie and Clyde chose the 1934 Ford for their fun trip across the country robbing banks. Current culture, of course, these aren't as popular with hot rodders as they used to be, but there is a very traditional I guess, counterculture to the hot rod movement that still builds these engines, still drives them across country. And one of them currently holds the land speed record of a little over 302 miles an hour. Let's take a look at the interior. The first of many cool features is the suicide doors. The Victoria was technically a sedan that was styled as a coupe, so you have two sets of seats. The way you access the back seat, you just flip the front seat up. The interior of this car is, like its exterior, restored in a deluxe configuration. It means you have all of the burl wood accents, mohair cloth, have things like armrests and ashtrays for pretty much everybody. There's a cool shade in the back in case the sun gets too intense. And there are some neat factory options. One of them is this clock in the rearview mirror. We have a working radio here. It actually has an MP3 dock, so you can plug your phone in and play some modern stuff. One cool thing about the 1934 Fords was what Ford called clear vision body ventilation. So it was, kind of like vent windows to get air flowing through the cab. It included a cowl vent, a crank out windshield, and neat windows that roll down in addition to doing this. Earlier I mentioned renowned Detroit architect Albert Kahn. One of the coolest details of this car, in my opinion, as a history nerd and an automotive nerd, is the commemorative Century of Progress shift knob. So in 1934, Chicago World's Fair, also known as the Century of Progress exhibition, Ford built what they called the Ford Rotunda. It was designed by Albert Kahn, and it comprised 11 acres of Ford exhibits that encompassed pretty much everything in the company's history. It was visited by about 50 million people. It was super popular. The Rotunda was eventually moved to Dearborn, where it was enjoyed until 1962, when unfortunately it burned. Now that we have a car on the lift, let's go take a look under it. So, as with a lot of our cars, the first thing you'll notice under this Ford is the quality of the restoration. Some nice painted floors, painted X-frame. Just like the top and the interior, everything is very correct to how it would have rolled off the production line. A lot nicer, obviously, but very correct. Have a 3-speed manual transmission, standard fare in these cars. It's driving this 3-speed is pretty much akin to driving a 3 on the tree. So it's a little bit different than what you would consider a normal 4-speed transmission. Torque tube, which goes to floating rear axle. The torque tube provides structure for the rear axle. So we have leaf springs that provide the up and down support for the axle. The torque tube provides location along with these radius arms, so you don't have axle wrap. So the axle stays, instead of going back and forth, it stays pretty stationary. Radius arm suspension with leaf springs. So we talked a little bit in last week's video about transverse leaf springs in early Fords and the durability aspect of those, how if you crack one leaf, you're not stranded on the side of the road. Same thing up front. Radius arms, transverse leaf. One cool thing about this car is it has mechanical brakes, and our consignment manager pointed out to me the other day that this might be the first car we've ever sold with mechanical brakes, meaning no fluid whatsoever in the brake system. Just a neat little fact. Manual steering. Another neat fact is the location of the fuel tank. Traditional rear mounted location is with the Model A's. This is a Model B actually. Model A's, as opposed to the Model T's, which were gravity fed and mounted in the cowl of the car. On the outside, tension wire wheels with tangentially mounted spokes. It's a hard word for mountain men like me to say. But the cool thing about this is updated radial tires. So these are going to ride a lot better than stock tires would have. The cool thing about spoke wheels is with the tangentially mounted spokes, they transfer torque and load between the hub and the rim, unlike traditional spoke wheels you might find on a bicycle. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this in-depth look at our 1934 Ford Victoria. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and comment below to let us know the answer to the trivia question and what else you would like to see. Thanks.